Sienna had always been the kind of woman people turned to when they didn't know where else to go. Soft-spoken, deep-eyed, and with a calm that made others feel seen. She lived alone in a small town near Lake Michigan, where the air smelled like pine and old love stories. She worked at the local library, spent her Sundays baking too much banana bread, and had a way of listening that made people tell her things they never meant to share. But what no one knew was that Sienna had quietly loved 5 people in her life. Not all at once, and not in the same way, but deeply, honestly, and with a kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return. Each of them had come into her, life like a quiet wave, left something beautiful behind, and drifted away with pieces of her heart. She never begged them to stay. She only ever asked one thing. If you ever come back, don't stop at the door. The first was Elias, the brooding painter from Seattle, with wind in his voice and paint under his fingernails. He once sketched her while she read by the fireplace and whispered that her silence was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. Then there was Jules, her childhood best friend from Toronto, with sun in her laugh and hands that always hovered, never landed. They came close once. A kiss that nearly happened at 17. But Jules pulled away, saying, "We're too young to ruin this." Then came Rafi, the charming, chaotic musician from Montreal who lived fast, loved harder, and left a handwritten note under her pillow the night he left for New York. It said, "I'm not good for you, Sienna. I'd break you, and I don't want that." But the one who shook her the most was Mina. She was wild, stormy, and sharp, a woman Sienna met at a book fair in Portland. Their connection was undeniable, magnetic. But Mina was battling demons she refused to name. She pushed Sienna away with tears and silence, saying, "I can't love anyone until I love myself, and that may never happen." And then there was Theo. Sweet, steady Theo from Vermont. He was almost the one. Kind eyes, big dreams, and a heart that made promises. But he left when his family needed him more. And the last time she saw him, he was slipping a ring onto someone else's hand. Yet when he looked at Sienna in the crowd, his eyes said something his mouth never dared. Now, years later, Sienna was 34, still gentle, still waiting for something she didn't know how to name. She wasn't lonely. She had a good life. But her heart still held rooms with lights on for each of them. And then, without warning, they all came back. One by one, in the same week. A storm of memories, regrets, and what-ifs arrived at her doorstep. Elias showed up with a canvas. Jules sent a text asking if they could talk. Rafi left a voicemail that sounded like a confession. Mina was spotted at the town diner, asking if Sienna still lived nearby. And Theo. Theo wrote her a letter, handwritten, with the words, "I never stopped wondering," underlined 3 times. Sienna stood in her kitchen, letter trembling in her hand, heart racing like it hadn't in years. The room felt too quiet, too full. She had asked them not to stop at the door, and now they were all standing just outside, waiting for her to let them in. 5 hearts from 5 different pasts, all wanting something. Forgiveness, closure, maybe even love. But what did she want? That was the question. And in that moment she realized the story wasn't about them coming back. It was about whether she was ready to open the door. The first one to return was Elias. He showed up. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, standing at the edge of Sienna's porch like a memory she never finished unpacking. He was soaked, holding a wrapped canvas close to his chest like it was a secret he'd carried too long. His hair was longer now, his beard fuller, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, hadn't changed. "I never stopped painting you," he said quietly, as if afraid the words might shatter something between them. He didn't ask to come in, just stood there with that same quiet intensity he always had. Sienna's heart ached with the weight of unfinished love, and before she could even process what his return meant, her phone buzzed. A message. From Jules. Just one line. "Can we talk? I've been thinking about you." Jules, her first almost love, the one who always danced around the edge but never jumped. Sienna remembered summer nights lying under the stars with her, fingers nearly touching, the way Jules would smile and say, "If things were different." But things never were. She hadn't heard from her in years, and now she wanted to talk. That night, Sienna couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, wondering if the universe was playing some kind of trick, but it wasn't done with her yet. 2 days later, Raffi showed up. He didn't knock. He never did. He sent a voice message, shaky and low. "I'm outside. I've been thinking about that letter you never sent me. I know I didn't deserve you back then, but I'm here now." Sienna peeked through the window and saw him leaning against his old red Jeep, guitar case in the back. He looked the same. Messy curls, a hoodie too thin for the weather, that boyish charm that once pulled her in so fast she forgot to breathe. And just when she thought her heart couldn't take more, Mina walked into the town diner the next morning. Sienna saw her from across the room, dressed in all black, hair tucked under a beanie, a bruise blooming beneath her right eye. Mina's eyes locked with hers, wide and unsure, like she hadn't planned this far ahead. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just walked over, sat down across from Sienna, and reached for her hand. And in that one touch, Sienna felt every wildfire, memory reignite. Mina had always been the hardest to love, not because she wasn't worth it, but because she never believed she was. And Sienna had spent too long trying to convince her otherwise. The final blow came a day later. Theo's letter arrived by mail. A thick envelope with her name written in his familiar, steady handwriting. Inside was a note. No return address, just his words. "I always wondered what would have happened if I chose you instead. If I hadn't let fear make my decisions. If I had stayed." And at the bottom, he wrote, "Did you ever want it to be me?" That question sat like a stone in her chest. Theo had always been her safe place, the person who made love feel soft and simple. But he had walked away, and now he was looking back. Sienna stood in the middle of her small kitchen, surrounded by pieces of her past. 5 hearts. 5 stories, each one unfinished. Her chest felt full and hollow at the same time, like everything she had buried was rising all at once. She had asked them not to disappear, not to stop at the door if they ever came back. And now, impossibly, unbelievably, they had listened. One by one they returned. But what none of them knew was that Sienna wasn't the same woman they left behind. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't need any of them the way she used to. Sienna knew she couldn't keep avoiding it. The past was no longer something she could tuck away in journals or forget over cups of tea. The people she once loved were no longer memories. They were flesh and breath, standing in front of her, asking for answers she wasn't sure she had. So she did something brave, something she never would have done years ago. She invited them in. Not all at once, but over a span of quiet days, into her small home where the scent of vanilla still clung to the air and books lined the walls like old friends. She didn't invite them in to choose one. She didn't promise anything. What she offered was space to talk, to feel, to finally let go of the words they never said. Elias came first. He brought the canvas he'd been carrying since the day he showed up. When he unwrapped it, Sienna nearly stopped breathing. It was her hands, her real hands, not posed, not perfect, but honest. One resting in her lap, the other reaching for something unseen. "You always looked like you were holding on to hope," he said softly, placing the painting against her wall before leaving without asking for anything in return. Then Jules came, with a small notebook worn at the edges. She sat beside Sienna on the couch, opened the pages, and began to read a poem. One she had written the night Sienna moved away. Every line was full of longing and regret. "I was scared," Jules admitted. "Not of loving you, but of losing what we had if I did." She cried, and Sienna held her, not as someone looking for answers, but as someone finally understanding the silence they once shared. Rafi came next, his energy quieter than before, like a storm that had passed through too many towns. He looked around the house like he didn't believe he belonged there anymore. "I ran because I thought you'd fix me," he said, voice low and rough. "But I was wrong. You weren't supposed to fix me. You were just supposed to love me, and I was too broken to let you." He played a song on his guitar, unfinished, raw, haunting, and left without asking her to forgive him. Mina returned that evening. No makeup, no mask, just her and the truth. She didn't say much. Instead, she walked to Sienna, wrapped her arms around her, and held her like she was trying to remember what it felt like to be safe. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I don't know if I'll ever be whole, but I know I still want you in the parts that are." Sienna kissed her on the cheek and said nothing, because sometimes silence says everything. And then, finally, Theo came. He didn't knock. He just walked in the way he used to when love was simple and days felt endless. He knelt beside her, couch, not to propose, but to apologize. "I thought I needed to choose the life that made sense," he said. "But the life I wanted always had you in it." He opened his palm, revealing the ring he never gave to someone else. "I'm not asking. I just wanted you to know." Sienna's heart ached, not from pain, but from the sheer weight of it all. These weren't strangers. These were the people who taught her how to feel. But now, something had shifted. She saw them clearly. Their flaws, their hopes, their truths. And in that clarity, she found her own. She looked at each of them, one by one, and said what none of them expected. "I asked you not to stop. And you didn't. But maybe I needed to." The quiet after it all felt heavier than Sienna expected. Not painful, but deep, like the hush that comes after a powerful song ends. Her home still held their voices, their stories, their tears. And though each of them had left, None of them were truly gone. Elias had been the first to go, gently, like the way he entered her life. He left the painting behind but took nothing with him except a soft smile and the words, "You don't have to be anyone's muse to matter." It struck her then that he had once seen her as inspiration, but now he saw her as a person. Jules followed the next morning. She hugged Sienna tight and said, "I wrote poems about you for years, but I never wrote any for myself. Maybe it's time I start." She kissed Sienna's cheek, warm, tender, lingering just long enough to remind her of all the almosts they once shared. Rafi left her with a song. Not a finished one, but a demo he recorded on his phone, clumsy and raw. He placed his phone in her hand, smiled, and said, "I don't know who I am without the running, but I want to figure it out now. And this time, I won't use you as my escape." Mina stayed the longest, lingering on the porch, unsure whether to leave or stay. Her fingers trembled when she said, "I've always been fire, but you were the one place I didn't want to burn down." She didn't ask Sienna to wait, didn't promise healing, just offered her honesty. And that, in the end, felt more real than any vow. Theo came last, standing by the doorway where it all began. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he placed the ring he once thought was meant for someone else on the windowsill. "I carried this hoping it would answer something," he said. "But I think I was just trying to hold on to a version of us that never had to suffer." His voice broke when he added, "You were never the one who left. I was. And I'm sorry I took this long to understand what that cost." Then, with a last glance, he walked out into the early morning fog, leaving behind nothing but the echo of truth. Sienna stood in the middle of it all, her little house, her worn floorboards, her now quiet heart, and breathed. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for someone to return or to stay. She wasn't holding her breath. She was simply still, not broken, not undone, just full of memories, of truths, of a kind of love that didn't need to be claimed to be real. She made tea, opened the windows, let the breeze in, and then she wrote in her journal, the same one she had started a decade ago, when all 5 of them first drifted into her life. Her final entry read, "I asked them not to stop, and they didn't. They came with pieces of my past, looking for closure, for comfort, maybe even for a second chance. But what happened with all 5 left me speechless, not because they loved me, but because I finally loved myself enough not to ask them to stay." There was no dramatic ending, no fairy tale kiss, just a woman who had loved deeply, let go gently, and found peace in the quiet that followed. And somehow, that was more romantic than anything she had ever imagined.